Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, a leaked Canadian police report confirms that the Bishnoi gang is indeed acting on behalf of the Indian government in its targeting of Sikhs and Khalistanis. But is this going to have any impact on the Canadian government and its trade mission currently underway to Delhi? Meanwhile, here in the UK, the British government still turns a blind eye as yet another Sikh is warned by police to increase his security after similar threats from India. So why are governments just not listening to their own intelligence agencies? And in India, a well-respected, rather famous actor sends a warning that India is preparing its next genocide against minorities. And if we don't wake up to the fact, it's going to be too late. All this and more on today's show, and of course, do stay tuned for the end of the show when we'll take a look at loads of great comments that have been filling up beneath the video, so thank you as always for those. Right, let's get underway. And we often talk about this disjoint between our respective governments and our law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Of course, the intelligence agencies know very well, on the whole, what is going on the ground. And they tend to send warnings and advice to our respective governments to say you need to act on this and that and the other. And then, of course, it is up to the governments to make those decisions. What do we do about it? What actions shall we take? And sadly, as I said in the introduction, there does appear to be this sort of disjoint between what our intelligence agencies are seeing and warning our governments about and what our governments are doing about it. And I'd say the British government is probably more guilty of this than any others, but the Canadian government has in recent times been accused of similar. Because, of course, since Mark Carney took over from Justin Trudeau, there have, of course, been raised concerns, particularly amongst the Sikh community, that Carney has been forging ahead, tying up deals and relationships with India, all the while post the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, actually murdered by the very nation he's shaking hands with, but also this ongoing transnational oppression. And I talk about how the intelligence agencies and law enforcement are providing advice to these governments. These governments are completely ignoring it. Now, it's not just us saying this. It turns out, as I said in the intro, there has been a leaked report in Canada that, fortunately, one of the news outlets, Global News, managed to get their hands on. Well done to those guys. And this report says, quite unequivocally, that the Bishnoi gang, this gang that is operated from a Gujarat jail cell by its leader, Lawrence Bishnoi, is very much operational in Canada, is very much operational, in fact, across North America, and it is specifically targeting Sikhs and Khalistanis on behalf of the Indian state, the effect of the Indian government, but essentially by that, read the RSS. So this report, I'm going to go through this report just to give you some highlights of what was brought out in this story. It says, the headline is very clear, the Bishnoi gang that's been accused of these acts of extortion and murder for hire has been, quote, acting on behalf of the Indian government, unquote. Powerful words, absolutely unambiguous, according to an RCMP, that's the Canadian Mounted Police, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, document obtained by the paper. Now, in a report on this, on the Bishnoi gang, the RCMP National Security Division mentioned the crime group's alleged ties to the government of India a half dozen times in just 3 pages. So again, it's not just a fleeting reference, there's a very clear, unambiguous link between the actions of the Bishnoi gang and the Indian state. You cannot get clearer than that. It was distributed internally last year. And this is obviously when Carney was in power. So again, he's got no excuse. There's no excuse of ignorance. I didn't know about this. It was very clearly put in front of his nose. It is a classified assessment of the Bishnoi gang's growing presence in Canada. A copy was released to the Global News on Monday under the Access to Information Act. So again, it's interesting. It's equivalent. It's a Canadian equivalent to the Freedom of Information Act we have here in the UK. It's extremely useful at times, and it means that any citizen has the right to demand or demand answers to questions posed to state bodies. Now, the Bishnoi crime group is a violent criminal organisation with an active, continually expanding presence in several countries, including Canada, this report says. Driven by greed rather than political or religious motives, the Bishnoi gang commits extortions, drug trafficking, money laundering and contract killings, the RCMP notes. Now, there is an interesting distinction here. It claims it's not political or religious. It is essentially by greed. Okay. I'll come back to that point. The Bishnoi crime group is known to use violence to further their criminal enterprise while acting on behalf of the Indian government, said the briefing, marked Protected A. Now, okay, it says this is not politically motivated, it's motivated by greed. But, and here's a big but, essentially, yes, it's a criminal gang, they go about their business. But who pays them to cause violence is political. This is where the political element comes into it. The Bishnoi gang itself, according to this report, is not political. They're targeting Sikhs and Khalistanis not because it's their own personal politics, it's because it's driven by greed. But ultimately, they are being paid or at least directed by the Indian state for political reasons. So even if the tool, the instrument being used to attack Sikhs itself isn't political, the user of that tool is political. It's like me using a hammer against a nail. You can't blame the hammer for hitting the nail, but you can blame me for driving that hammer into the nail. That's the distinction here. And it continues. The report isn't dated, but it does refer to David Ebbie's, he's the Premier of British Columbia, his June 17, 2025 statement asking the government to list the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist organisation. And it was released by the RCMP on the same day Ebbie began a January trade mission to India. Yes, I talked about this. Was it yesterday or a couple of days ago? Carney is also considering, or intending, not considering, he actually intends to visit India later this year. So you can see this disjoint that the Global News have brought out saying, look, on the one hand, you've got David Ebbie and Carney both being advised of what the Bishnoi gang are up to, and directed by the Indian state. Again, no ambiguity there, it's very clear. And yet, you've got a trade mission now happening where David Ebbie, the Premier of BC, is out there now shaking hands with his counterparts, with this very nation that we are warning you about that is killing or exploiting or extorting our citizens. So again, it's mind-blowing. Now, Balpreet Singh of the WSO, the World Sikh Organisation, said, it's deeply troubling that the Canadian government appears willing to overlook India's ongoing campaign of transnational oppression, and it's clear links to the Bishnoi gang at the expense of the safety and security of Canadians. So once again, this question comes up. How can we trust the Canadian government to look after us when you're doing things like this? You're being told that these people are a threat, the Indian state is a threat, and yet you continue with tying up trade deals. How can we rely on you and trust you to protect us? We can't. It's as simple as that. Now, the Indian High Commission didn't respond to a request for comment, surprise, surprise, nor did Carney's office, surprise, surprise. And Carney just brushed it off and said the justice system was dealing with incidents of violence. I mean, that's a complete non-answer. So, in October 2024, the RCMP Commissioner Michael Duhem further warned that the investigations had linked Indian officials to violent crimes in Canada, and I think we covered that at that time, that story. And at the time also Canada did expel 6 Indian consular and diplomatic officials in protest, but that was of course during Trudeau's time. But when Carney took office, he restored diplomatic ties and said he wants a trade deal with Modi. And we talked about this pivot once Trudeau left office, and Trudeau, as I keep saying, I always give him credit for standing up to India and calling India's actions out very publicly to his own loss of political capital to do so. It damaged him politically to do so, but he had the courage to stand up and call out India for doing what it was doing. But this complete political pivot of the party, of the Liberals in Canada, when Carney took over, and suddenly it's, no, let's restore diplomatic ties, let's tie up trade deals. This globalist Carney has a very, very different agenda. And I've said this before and I'll keep saying it. Carney represents the globalists, the World Economic Forum. All he cares about is global trade, is promoting the global commercial elite. He's not interested in human rights. They come very much, I was going to say secondary, I'd argue tertiary, and there's a very, very low down on his list of priorities. Now, according to this very report, the Bishnoi gang got its start by using intimidation in student politics. Of course, this is how Lawrence got started. He was clearly a very intelligent guy. He was at university in Gujarat, and he launched his criminal empire whilst still a student. and it grew since then to include an estimated 700 members in several Indian states. But it's gone global, and I've said in the past, it's such a waste of somebody who's deeply intelligent, who had the ability to build a global empire, a commercial empire, and make a legal success of his life. Instead, he turned to crime, and he's extended this crime gang across North America, Europe, and the Gulf states. And as I keep saying, what a waste of a life. He's now spending his life in a Gujarat prison. I mean, yes, he's treated like royalty in that prison, but nonetheless, he's in prison. He's not free. He could have been living a fabulous life of wealth and luxury and deep commercial success, having built a legal empire. Instead, he chose to go down the route of crime. But anyway, that's a different story. That's his choice. And his actions particularly target areas with large Punjabi diaspora communities, the RCMP wrote. Now, of course, this other character, Goldie Brar, enters the equation. He's believed to be one of Bishnoi's closest associates, and it's thought that he has actually taken over the Bishnoi crime group's activities on the ground. He's become Lawrence Bishnoi's sort of man on the ground now that Bishnoi is in prison. And Brar's real name is allegedly Satinderjeet Singh. The report repeats these same allegations that Indian agents were involved in Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing. It also said Bishnoi gang had claimed responsibility for killing another pro-Khalistan activist in Manitoba. Sukhdev Singh was killed in Winnipeg in September 2023, and like Nijjar, he had been labelled a terrorist by the Indian government, of course falsely claimed as a so-called terrorist. So there you go. So that's in Canada. And again, it's unequivocal that the Canadian government has been officially advised by the RCMP, its leading state law enforcement entity. It's policemen have told Carney, India is paying the Bishnoi gang to attack our own citizens on our own sovereign soil. And what does Mark Carney do about it? He ignores it, brushes it under the carpet, and now he's reaching out, he's sending out his premier from British Columbia to tie up trade deals, to shake hands with the very people who are instructing these people to kill Canadian citizens. There you go. What can you do about it? Other than do what we do, which is call it out and try to hold our governments to account. Now, as I said in the intro, it's not just Canada. It's also happening here in the UK. Our government, and I'm going to actually also refer back to our previous government, the Conservative government, who were equally as guilty of this, and then followed up with interest by Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Exactly the same scenario. Now, The Guardian, one of our left-leaning newspapers or news outlets, reported a couple of days ago this story. And again, it's no surprise. It's old news, but it's recirculated, recycled, because it's still there. It's not just still there, it's ramping up again. This is the story, once again, of another Sikh activist in the United Kingdom told to increase his own personal security because our intelligence agencies and our police force know that Indian operatives, RSS operatives, Hindutva operatives, whatever you call it, RAW agents, NIA agents are operating in the UK on British sovereign territory, targeting British citizens in our Sikh community. So, I'll quickly again, likewise, simply just give you a quick cherry pick a few facts in this story. Police have advised a high-profile Sikh activist in the UK to install security cameras at his home and reinforce door locks because of threats from Hindu nationalist elements. Again, these stories render me speechless, because the British state know who's behind this. The British state know that our own citizens, who they are legally obliged to protect, are under attack and under threat. And what's the advice? Well, we can't protect you, but we advise you, change your door locks, just install CCTV. Yeah, okay, great, thanks. But that's, ultimately, it's your job to protect our citizens, and your job up the political ladder goes to the government. It's the government's job to protect our citizens, not just say, oh, we'll install some CCTV, but best of luck and wash their hands of it. Now, this is Paramjit Singh Pamar, who's been visited by police recently and received verbal advice again to increase his security due to intelligence suggesting threats to his safety. And once again, to mirror the story in Canada, our agencies, intelligence agencies, know that the Indian state is behind this. It is Hindu nationalist extremists on behalf of the Indian state. But what is Keir Starmer doing about it? He's crowing with great pride how he's just tied up a trade deal with Narendra Modi. And every time he's asked about Jagtar Singh Johal, or every time he's asked about human rights abuses in India, he ignores the question. He talks about we're tying up commercial trade deals. Make your own conclusions from that. Now, according to MI5, that's our own domestic intelligence agency, foreign governments are increasingly targeting dissidents on UK soil. The number of investigations into state threats has grown by 48% in the last 3 years, or 4 years it is now. In last year's report on transnational repression, the Joint Committee on Human Rights listed India as a country of concern alongside China and Russia. So again, you can see, and I did report this at the time when the report came out, China and Russia are well-known countries who are basically genuine present-day threats to national security of the United Kingdom and indeed Western democracies. India is named alongside those two nations. Again, unequivocally, unambiguously, India has been advised as a threat to our national interests here in the United Kingdom by our intelligence agencies. What is our government doing about it? It's signing up trade deals and ignoring it. Singh Pamar himself claims, all these stories about Singh Pamar come as, in fact, this article in The Guardian just basically reflects what I've just said. The UK pursues a closer relationship with Modi's Hindu nationalist government, seeing it as a key partner to balance China's growing power. As I keep saying, yeah, great in theory, in practice, they are not a key partner. They are an unreliable ally. As we keep pointing out, how much evidence do we need to keep reminding our government, not that they take a blindest bit of notice. They're certainly not going to take any notice of me if they're not taking any notice of our own intelligence agencies. Look at the latest Chinese embassy as a prime example of that here in London. That's a different story. Anyway, the UK, of course, did tie up this trade deal with India, but Singh Pamar is one of two Sikh nationalists based in the UK to have told The Guardian they have been advised to increase their security. And actually, it's many more than that. I know personally of several who've been advised by our intelligence agencies, or at least by our police force, to be careful because there are threats to life. They've been given these official threats to life warnings. And the repression we're going through has been relentless, he says. It's crossing borders and reaching into our families now. This is terror, basically, by the Indian government. It's ironic, again, the Indian government regularly label Khalistani activists across the West as terrorists. And yet, who is the party that is actually operating terrorist activities? It's India. There is, again, no ambiguity about this. It is India that is harassing, intimidating, murdering citizens on foreign soil. These are acts of terror. So who actually is, quote, the terrorist here? Singh Pamar said he regularly reported threats to the police, but they only began to take his complaints seriously after Hardeep Singh Nijjar was murdered in Canada in 2023. He said he's now regularly visited by local and counter-terrorism police and was last visited by local officers as recently as October. So this isn't an old thing or forgotten about. It's still ongoing. His life is still, even now, under threat, despite, even in the mainstream media reporting that India is a threat. India is threatening our Sikh population. India is targeting our Khalistani campaigners here in the UK. Avtar Singh Kandar, probably murdered by India. We seem to have forgotten about that on behalf of the state. The British government certainly doesn't want to talk about it. It's embarrassed about it because it's afraid of uncovering the truth. It knows the truth. It just doesn't want the public to know it knows the truth. A Home Office spokesperson said they didn't comment on individual cases or intelligence matters. They said, "We are proud of our diverse communities, and British Sikhs make an immense contribution to the strength of our society. Their safety, like that of everyone in the United Kingdom, remains our highest priority." Now, I'm going to use a rude word. I don't have a bleep machine, so apologies for this. What a load of utter bollocks. That's a British swear word. Apologies for that. I mean, this again is just typical civil servants who say, "We're proud of our diverse communities. We take their safety as our highest priority." Well, clearly you don't. Absolutely you don't. The evidence is here. I'm laying out the evidence that you do not take the safety of our Sikh community as your highest priority. They are under threat. They are being given threats to life warnings. What is what is the civil service and what is the government doing about it? Absolutely nothing. This article refers to the Air India flight. Sadly, the journalist doesn't realise that the truthful story behind the bombing of Air India and just takes the lazy angle. I can't blame the journalists for this. They've obviously written this quite quickly, but they blame the Air India flight, the Kanashka bombing, on what it says Khalistani militants. But it said, Singh Pama is reported in Indian media to have previously been a fundraiser for Baba Khalsa International, which investigators believe was responsible for the bombing. Well, again, it's slightly misinformation that, because we believe it's RAW, the Indian intelligence agency, who were behind the Air India bombing. But anyway, it says here that Singh Pama himself has been linked to this organisation. Again, you try and find out the truth about Baba Khalsa International. But in fact, one of our commenters said recently, there is no such thing as Baba Khalsa International. It's this fabricated entity created by Hindutva and the RSS to at least try and put an object to target, to give a label to what it claims is Khalistani terrorists. It's fabricated this sort of this pseudo terrorist organisation that in reality doesn't really exist. But anyway, Singh Pama, he lived in Delhi before moving to the Punjab. His elder brother was killed by Indian police for his activism in 1991. Yes, of course, he was extrajudicially murdered by the Indian state. You see, there's a pattern here. He claimed he was picked up multiple times and tortured by police before leaving India and being given political asylum in the UK in 2000. So again, this guy, and we've talked about Singh Pama on several occasions. Actually, he has been very active here in the UK, campaigning for Khalistan and Sikh issues. But and part of this is because he personally was affected by the terrible genocides and murders, the extrajudicial murders of Sikhs in the 1980s and 1990s, and his own brother was murdered by the Indian state. So you can't blame this guy for having a bit of an argument with the Indian state. Now, he himself was arrested in 2010 after authorities in Punjab said they suspected him of involvement in a murder, but UK counter-terrorism police could find no evidence against him. In 2015, he was detained on holiday in Portugal, but a judge threw out India's attempt to make him stand trial on terrorism charges. And again, I've reported this in the past when we've talked about Singh Pama. And again, India has tried everything it can to try and legally close him down. They tried here in the UK, they tried in Portugal through the European Union. And both police forces, whether in the European Union or here in the UK, investigated and said, there is no case to answer. There is no evidence. It doesn't matter what doesn't matter what you're saying. You've got to give us evidence. We've looked into it. There is no evidence. He is a terrorist. Again, it's very clear. It reflects what's happening in Canada. India has tried, I think it's over a dozen times, to try and label various Khalistani campaigners as terrorists. It's legally sent evidence to the Canadian police force, the RCMP. RCMP have investigated every single time without exception, have said there is no case to answer. These people are not terrorists. He says when he came back to the UK, visitors had come to his home with guns in broad daylight, which again in the UK, where we have no guns in normal circulation, it's shocking this. This is India, terrorists operating on UK soil. So visitors came to his home with guns in daylight. He was out at the time. Men told his neighbours he had to stop his activism or he would be killed. Again, the statement, who actually are the terrorists here? It's not him. It's the Indian state. A member of the Sikh community told him he was offered £300,000, that's about $400,000 by someone else in the community to kill him. Gurcharan Singh, a Sikh nationalist activist, again a Khalistani, has also been told by UK police that they know of credible threats to his safety. In Slough, that's just west of London, Singh has a private security team and receives visits from officers nearly every 2 months. So again, this is another Khalistani activist who he's again not protected by the British state. He's been told by the British state, your life is under threat from India. In fact, specifically, they're not allowed to tell him who the threat comes from, but they know, and he knows it's from India. So he's had to pay for his own private security. And yet, counter-terrorism officers keep visiting him saying, look, just be careful, your life's in danger, etc., etc. So again, that's again, two very, very similar stories in the UK and in Canada, reflecting exactly the same issues. As I said in the opening of this, our governments are ignoring our very own law enforcement agencies and our own intelligence agencies who are trying to warn them. Our citizens in North America, our citizens in the UK and indeed down under in Europe, wherever there is a diaspora, and particularly wherever the Khalistani campaign is gaining strength, these individuals are being threatened by a terrorist state, the state of India. It is unambiguous. It is being set out clearly by the RCMP in Canada. It is advising the Canadian government these people are terrorists and they're attacking our citizens. It is happening under MI5, advising our government here in the UK that the Indian state are acting as terrorists, targeting our own citizens on British soil. But what are our respective governments doing about it? Absolutely nothing other than tying up trade deals with a terrorist nation. Naivety, stupidity, or incompetence? Take your pick. Right, let's move on. Now, talking about an Indian state running out of accountability, there's a very well-known actor, a guy called Prakash Raj. He's a very well-known actor in India. He made a speech recently, and he made a speech at the Association for Protection of Civil Rights event in Hyderabad. He's an actor, he's a film director, he's a producer, television presenter, and he's also a politician. He's a former, he dabbled in politics, let's say. Actors are quite well known right across the world for always having an opinion, and they're very, very quite keen to voice their opinions, whether it's at the Golden Globes or the Oscars, or whether it is indeed at an event in Hyderabad. And these actors, they do actually have a lot of influence because, of course, their faces are well known, their voices are well known. So they do actually hold quite a lot of influential power across the general public. Now, on the whole, these political actors, these actors with political views, tend to be, I would say, ignored on the large part because they tend to be a little bit sort of emotional about these things, and a lot of the things that they talk about, they don't know very much about. They sort of jump on the latest political bandwagon and then use their platform to sort of spread their views. Now, that is their prerogative. They have a right, they have a freedom of speech, etc. But this is different. Prakash Raj, he is an Indian actor. But he has used his profile to actually send out warnings. And again, these are not just idle warnings. This isn't just to try and raise his own profile or jumping on a bandwagon. This guy is genuinely concerned about what is going on in India, and he has sent out a warning. Now, his excuse me whilst I have a mug of chai to wet the whistle, as we say in English. He is an award-winning actor, so again, his voice carries a lot of weight. He's also, he speaks several languages, and this is what not just makes him powerful and useful as an actor, it also means that a lot of people around India listen to what he says. He actually, his native language is Tulu and Kannada, but he's also fluent in Tamil, so therefore Tamil Nadu can relate to him. That's a big independent secessionist state. Telugu, Hindi, of course English, and Marathi. And this, because he speaks so many languages, it means he's become very popular as an actor, as of course you would be. He did dabble in politics. He did contest in the 2019 election. He did contest Bengaluru Central constituency for the Lok Sabha. He didn't win. He lost. But he claims he only did that because he claims, he said, I just wanted to understand what the process was firsthand so he can then talk about it knowledgeably in the future. So that's a little bit of background about who he is. Now, Prakash made this speech, and again, I'm going to show you. The speech was about 10, 12, 15 minutes long, whatever, and I'm going to just take a few excerpts from the speech, a few of the sort of the key highlights and the points he brought out. But it stands as a very, very important warning to the people of India. And let me just, I'll kick us off. Here's Prakash, and I'll start us off. This is sort of his opening words. He talks about when he was speaking recently in Delhi. He's now repeating his warning that he started in Delhi.
A few months back, I was in Delhi talking for the political prisoners. Please try to understand whatever is happening in this country is a preparation of a genocide. They want to wipe out Muslims. They want to wipe out tribal people, minorities. That is their agenda. We may talk of rules, regulations, nothing matters to them. They don't have a conscience.
They don't have a conscience. He's using the word genocide. And again, the word genocide is bandied around a little bit too loosely in modern eras. But this is genuine, and I think he genuinely fears that there is a genocide. And he's talking about evidence that we've obviously covered on many occasions ourselves. So we know what he's saying is not saying this idly. He genuinely means this. There is a clear agenda to target the minorities, the tribes, the Muslims. Of course, we know the Sikh community, etc. So there is a clear Hindu extremist agenda to genocide, to mass murder and drive out any of the minorities. And he continues now. He's going to start looking at some of the more specifics. He's going to start looking at and analysing how India is changing and is looking at the various elements of Indian infrastructure and how it's being used to weaponise and to enable, to facilitate this genocide against the minorities.
Time and again across the world, we keep saying justice delayed is justice denied. We had our own police stations. But all the politicians, including the Congress, they created such an unlawful, arm-twisting, corrupt police stations that common man was afraid to go to a police station.
So he's targeting, firstly, law enforcement. He's saying our police stations and our police force is deeply corrupt. In the old days, you used to be able to rely or trust on a policeman. Certainly here in the UK, you see, generally speaking, you see a policeman as somebody that you should be able to trust. But he's saying in India, and he started off that section by saying justice delayed, justice denied. Again, that's a reference to how lawfare, the law is being weaponised against minorities. But specifically on the ground, police stations, you cannot trust the police. The police are enacting illegal activities. We often talk about the torture cells. We do know that most police stations in India have a torture cell. This is a country, India, that has not signed, or is signed but not ratified. That means it has not made law that torture is an illegal activity. Every other country, almost every single other country on the planet has signed the UN Charter against torture, except for India and one or two other exceptions. So we do know that torture is a common practice in Indian police cells. And he's saying this. He actually says children are afraid to go to the police. The children are afraid of the police, and people are afraid to go to the police. You shouldn't be afraid of going to the police. They should be your first port of call for protection and help if you are in danger or you're in trouble or whatever. And likewise, again, how many examples have we talked about in the past on Perspectives where, for example, women who've been raped have gone to the police to report that rape and have been sexually assaulted by the very police that they're reporting it to? There was that daughter of an Indian officer who had that. She was raped or sexually assaulted, went to a police station and was then sexually assaulted by the very police she'd reported it to. Again, so he's saying this is how deeply damaged India is, how deeply corrupt the Indian police force is. And he doesn't stop there. His next section now elevates this. It's not just the police, it's now the law system, the law courts themselves.
We used to always hear a word when there was an atrocity, when somebody was wanted to silence us. We used to say, we will see you in the court. Why were we saying we will see you in the court? Because court was the last hope for us. We were sure that a court does not belong to a political party, does not belong to the ruling government, does not belong to any religious institution. But sadly today, I dare give this statement on this dais. Shame on you, the courts of India. Because you are committing the biggest crime, killing justice.
Now, this is a very important point, because, of course, and we've talked about it regularly. 1947, India goes independent. It inherits a functioning, effective legal system. It inherits a court system that functions extremely well, that was independent. It reflected the legal system of obviously the United Kingdom, Great Britain at the time, but it worked. It functioned very well because it was independent. It was independent of any political influence, independent of anything else. It just enacted the law coldly, factually, without any emotion. And that is how a court system, a legal system, needs to function fairly and justly. That's how they work. As soon as you start introducing politics into a legal system, it starts to fail. And what he said, and it's not part of this clip, but he said over the last couple of decades, and specifically really since 2014, of course, when the BJP government took control, and certainly we saw the RSS gaining a stronger stranglehold of the Indian infrastructure, particularly Indian government politics. Since the RSS have taken control, they have politicised the legal system. They have injected politics into the court system. As he said in the old days, if you had a problem with somebody, I'll see you in court, because you knew you could rely on the courts to pass a fair and just judgment based on the facts. Now you can't. As he says, the legal system has been weaponized, has been influenced and controlled by the RSS to target its political opponents. Amritpal Singh is just one example of hundreds of thousands. In other words, the law has been weaponized. The law has been taken control of by the political system, but essentially by the RSS, and being used as a weapon. That means you can no longer trust the law. And once you stop being able to trust the law, your society is in a downward slide to the end, to anarchy, to genocides, to authoritarian regimes, etc. In other words, India is finished. Unless it can save its legal system, the legal system is one of the key foundations of a democracy. Once that dies, your democracy is over. Your nation is finished. It is over. And this is warning. This is what's happening in India. Now, it's not just Prakash warning this. Many others have warned this. We warn of this very problem regularly here in Perspectives. If you don't save the legal system in India, India is finished. It's literally as simple as that. So, in other words, this lawfare that the RSS is using against its political opponents is destroying the very nation that they're trying to build. Courts were our last hope, he said. It's over now. Now he continues, of course, is now going to start saying where the genuine problem lies.
You are fighting BJP. Don't fight BJP. You have to fight the RSS. I had a very interesting political analyst who was talking to me that why Hitler failed, why Mussolini failed. Because they started a political party. They were a political party. Here, RSS is not a political party.
That's an interesting point there. He's saying, look, the problem isn't the BJP. The problem, of course, is behind the scenes. It's the RSS. Obviously, we know that. And the BJP is, in fact, just the political arm of the RSS. The RSS has several entities that represent it, whether it's in academia or in politics, the BJP. And he's saying, look, there's no point targeting the BJP. The BJP are not the problem. You need to get behind the BJP. It is the RSS that is the problem. And I haven't shown this, but he actually uses a metaphor. He's saying it's like on a pond. If you've got a lily pad on a pond, it doesn't matter if you remove the lily pad. That's not the problem. It's the root that goes underneath it that is the problem. And that's essentially what it's saying. You need to remove the RSS. If you're ever going to address this problem, it's the RSS that is the problem. That is what needs to be removed. He continues.
Recently, I got a letter from Prime Minister Modi. A letter full of lies. Beautiful lies. He says, if there was no constitution of this country, I would not have come up to this stage from the small beginnings. Ambedkar is the greatest man. Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest man. What a liar he is.
I mean, we talk regularly ourselves about Mahatma Gandhi, see some of my podcasts about Mahatma Gandhi, but he said he actually received an email, as many apparently Indian citizens did, very recently. And again, it was just full of lies and propaganda, so surprise, surprise. But then he continues.
On the Ram Mandir, there was a flag being hoisted.
And this is the day before this letter was sent out to Indian citizens.
The prime ministers of this country and the RSS chief were there. His hands were shivering, seeing that flag going up, Bharat Dwaj flag. What reverence he has for that flag, for his idea of Hindutva. I'm wondering, does this man really have this reverence to our national flag? No, their agenda is different. Their agenda is genocide. Their agenda is to bring the Manusmriti. Their agenda is to change the constitution because they are not comfortable with that. They want you, me, Umar, everyone to be the secondary citizens.
Indeed. So, he's just reflecting again the narrative that we constantly have to warn people about, is that the RSS has one very clear agenda. That is a Hindu Rashtra, and that everybody else who does not fall under the Hindu extremist ideology is therefore to be either driven out, removed, eliminated, genocided, as Prakash is warning, or to be absorbed into the Hindu Rashtra. You will align, you will convert, you will become a Hindu, and you will support the Hindu Rashtra, or else. That essentially is the warning. And the RSS are literally prepared to do anything to achieve that aim, including, as Prakash warns, to change the Constitution. The Constitution is uncomfortable for the RSS. Now, the Constitution was written in the around about 1950, the late 1940s. It was written by the Brahmin, the ruling elite, the upper caste of India. It was written by them to ensure that they maintained control, that they took control and maintained control of India for the benefit of essentially the Brahmin upper caste elite. But ultimately, the RSS that was formed in 1925, the RSS have sort of hidden behind the scenes. Of course, many of these Brahmins represent the RSS. And they, of course, don't like this constitution that was written. It was a secular constitution. It's still, actually, ironically, as a subtext, it did still give a preference to Hinduism, despite it being a secular constitution. But ultimately, the constitution has been changed at the RSS convenience. Look at J&K, where I forget which specific section it was, but there was one specific clause that was struck out and rubber stamped by the Supreme Court. We talk about weaponising lawfare and weaponising the court system, politicising the court system. A whole clause was struck out of the Constitution that gave J&K its autonomy. It has had a special condition written into the Indian Constitution that gave J&K a special level of autonomy. That was just completely written out by the BJP government and rubber stamped by its pet court, the Supreme Court. This is a warning sign, and this is what Prakash is warning. Saying the Constitution is almost irrelevant to the RSS. They're going to remove it. They're going to change it to suit their own agenda. This agenda, as he said, is a genocide, a potential genocide of anybody who is not a Hindu and signs up to the Hindu Rashtra. And here's his final warning.
Be aware. Be careful. Today they are coming for the Muslims. Tomorrow they will come to you. So their agenda is very clear. Is to kill the democracy, kill all systems. It is time for us to wake up now, raise our voice, and tell them that we are here, we are not afraid, we will continue to speak the truth. If you can lie to us 100 times, let's speak the truth 1,000 times.
Couldn't put it better myself. That is a warning. And it's interesting that, and again, how regularly, and certainly in my podcasts, we have referred to the similarities about the rise of the RSS regime in India to the rise of the Nazi regime, and the same methodology. They have basically been following the fascist methodology of the 1930s, whether it was Mussolini's fascist methodology or whether it was Hitler's fascist Nazi ideology. The RSS, through its political arm, the BJP, have essentially been following the same process, the same methods. They are, the warning again reflects, and it's interesting, is use these very words, because this reflects a very famous poem written by, I think, a pastor post World War II, where basically, in a very quick summary, it basically says, first they came for the Jews, but you didn't speak out. Then they came for somebody else, but you didn't speak out. and now they come for you, but there is nobody left to speak out for you. So this is his warning. If you don't speak out now, then next they will come for you, and there'll be nobody to speak out for you to come and save you. So that is his warning, and that reflects this fear that India is following the same Nazi model. It is following the same methodology. It is sinking into an authoritarian regime where it is driving this Hindu Rashtra, and anybody who doesn't align with that, God help you, because you will become a target in the same way that the Nazis persecuted and mass murdered, genocided the Jews. Prakash is warning, look, we need to wake up in India because this same form of genocide is now on our horizon. There is a danger that literally the RSS are going to genocide anybody who does not align with the RSS and the Hindu philosophy, this extremist nationalist agenda. So there you go. Thank you, Prakash Raj, for that warning. As I say, it does very much reflect many of the things that we have warned about ourselves on this very channel. Right, let's move on now. And talking about Hinduism, let's move on to our comments column. Thank you to all our commenters who have always been contributing wonderfully to our comments columns. And I'm going to start off with Salmai Chicken. And I talk about Hinduism. This comment, this didn't make Critics Corner. In fact, I almost created a new corner called Silly Corner, Silly Comments Corner. Yeah, this is an old one. Sikhism is Hinduism. And I've just thrown this up quickly because our audience know my reaction, and I know your reaction to this one. Sikhism is Hinduism. No, it is not. You need to go away. Go back to school, Salmai Chicken. Sikhism is nothing to do with Hinduism. Yes, it aligns on certain values, as do many religions align on basic moral values, human values. But it is not Hinduism. It is not Islam. It is nothing else. It is Sikhism. It is an independent, separate religion from any other religion. There's no ambiguity there. So Salmai Chicken, thank you for your comment, but you need to go back to school and learn what Sikhism genuinely is. Right, we had a lot of comments about the events in New Zealand, and that Brian Tamaki character and his bunch of extremists doing the haka and attacking the Nagar curtains. It all comes down to human nature. These comments really follow a very sort of similar theme. Fatih Singh says they're not whites. Your comment is they are indigenous people in New Zealand. Well, who are the indigenous people in New Zealand? Actually, technically, there is nobody who is indigenous in New Zealand. Even the Maoris, who some argue are the indigenous people of New Zealand, even they are immigrants. They didn't arrive till something like the 14th century. They themselves are Polynesian. They came from the islands, the Pacific Islands. They arrived literally by canoe in the 14th century. So even they are immigrants. In other words, this whole argument about keep New Zealand for New Zealanders, there is no such thing as New Zealanders other than the people who live in New Zealand today. New Zealand is essentially completely 100% occupied by immigrants. Simple as that. So Fatih, thank you for that comment. I don't know if that was the point that you were making, but yeah, let's just clarify this. The whites are not indigenous. The Maoris technically are not indigenous, although I think they are labelled as indigenous. But even they themselves were immigrants. But ultimately, the whites who were appropriating the haka, and there were whites, a lot of whites in that march who were doing the haka. They're not indigenous. They are doing this cultural appropriation, doing the haka, but the whole thing was farcical anyway. But Narinderjit Singh Saini says, you've lived in Auckland for 20 years. You've never seen anything so appalling, so disgusting as this, and insulting the haka. Absolutely. Thank you for your comment. Stacey says, always Angus, he's consistent. Adele, really appreciate it. Nice studio, thank you. I wanted to put this comment out because I always like to take the opportunity to show my studio off. I spent so long building it and putting it all together. So thank you for the appreciation. I really do appreciate it. I hope the studio is suitable for our needs. So thank you for that comment. And then Ripperji. Good morning to you. Regarding New Zealand, this is an interesting point. One event a year should be enough in the West. It's just your opinion. There are other ways to represent our faith other than these big get-togethers. We must change with changing times. This was never part of Sikhi during the Guru times, these big public displays that then attract unwanted attention. It's up to you. At the end of the day, it's your community. You can basically do what you want. But what I would say is that never, ever, ever cancel events or feel that you shouldn't do these events because of intimidation from other people. That is surrendering. That is giving in. In fact, the reaction should be quite the opposite. If you're going to intimidate us, we'll take to the streets even more just to prove our point. Our freedom of expression. This is all about freedom of expression. It doesn't matter what religion you are. You have the right to march, celebrate in the streets. As long as you're not breaking any laws, you have that right to get out there. And I would say to you, Ripperji, absolutely, if you feel that one event a year is enough to feel you've celebrated what you need to celebrate, fine. But certainly never, ever, ever feel that you should be cowed into submission by these extremists. Never let them win this battle. Never let their principles defeat yours, because your principles are obviously much more or founded on much better morality, etc., founded on the basics of democracy. So I know which side I certainly stand on. So thank you, Ripperji, for your input on that. It's an interesting thought. This is the three comments that follow a common theme of humanity and human nature. I often talk about human nature. I talk about the 1 in 10s. This, if you put, just to reiterate this to people who don't know this theory that I have, I call it the 1 in 10 theory, is that if you put 10 average human beings into a room, one of those people in that room, one of the 10, will be genetically designed, driven to want to control everybody else in that room, to want to take all the wealth, all the resources of the other 9 in that room. And the theory goes on to say that there'll be another person in that room, another 1 in 10, who is what I call the free thinker. That free thinker will be warning the other 8. Look, this is what the other 1 in 10, the controller, this is what the controller's doing. But the trouble is that those 8, the remaining 8, don't believe the free thinker, because the controller controls the narrative. Because he's accumulated all the wealth, he has control over the message that the 8 of the 10, the majority, hear. So the 8 of the 10 majority then believe the controller. They dismiss the free thinker. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, because that's what the controller has basically told them to think. And that is how society moves forward. And eventually the 8 out of 10 realise finally that the free thinker was right. It wasn't conspiracy theory. They were being controlled by the 1 in 10. So they reset and they turn on the 1 in 10, and the 1 in 10 goes back, but then the cycle starts all over again. Anyway, that's my sort of theory of human nature, and you can scale that up from anything from your local village up to global events. It follows that sort of same thing. It is the 1 in 10s that are behind every single war on this planet. It is the 1 in 10s that is behind all the greed, all the evil. But it is essential. This is what drives humanity forward. You can't remove the 1 in 10s, because it is them that actually drive our species forward, ironically. But anyway, so thank you to Harnal Singh, starts us off. It's all about money. There's good and bad people, ugly people. Don't blame them. It's human nature. You're right. TC, likewise, follows up a similar sort of theme. Thank you, saying it's important to have an English-speaking satellage, as the ignorance over Sikhi needs to be addressed in a language that these embittered, hate-damaged, misguided individuals can understand. Absolutely. I don't think they'll be watching the show, but if they do, at least they can understand the language. They may not wish to be educated. It doesn't suit their agenda or their bank balance. Again, this reference to money. Never say never. The light of truth may break through. Many Christians are disgusted by these hateful displays. I've no doubt they are. These guys are extremists. They are really at the far end, this sort of fringe end of a complete extremist. They're lunatics. It's a cult, basically. Etc., etc. So thank you, TC. And then Rich follows up. Thank you for spreading the truth. That's what I'm here for. God blesses all religions. Unfortunately, there are haters and extremists in every religion. Again, it's this human nature. It's the 1 in 10s. These extremists. Political extremists, racist extremists, the list goes on. The bottom line is that human beings are a violent, destructive species. Yeah, they're not. It's the 1 in 10s that are. It is the 1 in 10s that manipulate the rest of us into believing we need to wage war on Russia. We need to wage war on China, and likewise Russia says we need to wage war on the West, or we need to invade Taiwan. All these things are driven by literally a handful of individuals. 99.9999% of humanity. We don't want to go to war. I have no argument with anybody in Russia. I have no argument with anybody anywhere else on the planet. I have no argument with anybody. I want to live my life happily, peacefully, and get on with my life. Enjoy my day job. Enjoy presenting perspectives. As indeed you guys. I'm sure most, if not all of you, just want to live your lives peacefully. You've got no argument with your fellow human beings. It's just the 1 in 10s who feel they need to control, to own everything. They are genetically driven. They cannot help themselves. There are individuals, we can all name them. Bill Gates, George Soros, Tony Blair, all these individuals, some will say Donald Trump, etc. These individuals are genetically driven. They cannot help themselves. This is how they were made by God. It is literally as simple as that. They cannot stop themselves. This is why a millionaire becomes a billionaire, why a billionaire becomes a trillionaire, because it's not enough. It doesn't matter. It's not about how much money they have. It's because they are genetically driven to want more. They could have $1 zillion. It's not enough. I want more. This is what drives these people. And going back to my 1 in 10 theory, this is nature at work. This is why human beings survive as a species, is because we are driven forward by these people. If you remove these people from our species, if you somehow genetically remove that gene from these individuals, humanity sadly would die, because they are the ones that drive us forward. They drive us in the wrong direction periodically, and this is where the free thinker drags us back into the correct line, but ultimately we are as a species moving forward. That's what it's all about. But as Rich says, this is a warning. We need to get our shit together. Otherwise, our primate genes will end up annihilating ourselves on this planet. Yeah, absolutely. And this is the balance that the 1 in 10s play. They drive us forward. They drive us to war each time. But ultimately, we now have weapons that can literally blow this planet up. That is the fear, is that now the 1 in 10s have the ability to blow us up. The hope is that they have enough self-preservation in their own lives that they're not going to blow us up. It does concern me that all these people now own large tracts of lands in New Zealand, talking of New Zealand, and nuclear shelters in New Zealand have had a bumper last couple of years for, I'm sure, very good reason. Make of that as you will. Anyway, Critic's Corner returns. R1, whatever. Khalistanis are rapidly becoming puppets for the West. Where does this evidence come from? Bullshit. Khalistanis learn about your history and origin. Now, where do I begin on this? I know our audience will have your own opinions, but ultimately, okay, Khalistanis are becoming puppets of the West. No, I don't think they are. I think the West has much bigger agenda in play. It is actually Khalistanis who are trying very hard to persuade the West to align. It's not the West the West is controlling the Khalistan movement. It's completely the opposite way around. The Khalistan movement is trying to get the Western governments to agree and believe in the concept. That is really what's driving the Khalistan movement. We need Western leaders to get on board with the concept because it will serve Western interests better. So you've got it completely the wrong way around. Khalistanis learn about your history and origin. Well, the whole concept of Khalistan is based on Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire of the 19th century. That's the history. What more history do you need? There is a deep, proud heritage and history amongst the Sikh people. That is what drives them to want their own sovereign land, their own autonomous decision-making ability over their own future, their own destiny. This is what drives the Khalistan movement. So I don't understand about your history and origin. If you disagree, R1SH1AM, let me know about what have I got wrong historically? What has the Khalistan movement got wrong historically? It's very easy to make these sort of throwaway comments, but ultimately you've got to back it up with a little bit of argument. I welcome your comment. Thank you for your comment. It is appreciated, but at least back it up with a little bit more evidence. You say, where's your evidence? Well, where's your evidence for what you're saying? Just even give me a clue. Send me a message. Email me. Let me know your thoughts. I'd be delighted to know how you back up your claim, because ultimately we're all here for the truth. We're here to be open-minded. But we need evidence to base our decisions. Anyway, thank you nonetheless for that comment. And here we go. Last set starts off with Sam saying, it is impossible to bury the truth. Truth is the language of God. Indeed, as we often say, the truth always prevails. It does. It doesn't matter how hard you try. The truth always comes out in the end. You've got to be careful when you're a professional liar, and I'm looking at many politicians about this, is that the truth always comes out in the end. You can't stop the truth coming out. The truth is the truth because, as you say, it is the language of God, as Samsung says. Lackwinder, thank you. Joining us from Chicago. Greetings to all of you guys in Chicago. Thanks for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And do let us know where you're from. I do love to give you guys a shout out whatever far-flung parts of the world you happen to be watching from. It's always interesting, certainly from our side, to know where you're watching from. Human says, Sikhs are calm and composed during chaos and war. That is what makes them so effective. They have a rich history of sacrifice for their gurus and for humanity. Absolutely. It was a British officer, I think, who said in the 19th century, give me an army of Sikhs. For a very good reason, because Sikhs are deeply respected, certainly by the British, and certainly by the British Army, the British military, because they are calm, they are composed during chaos and war. It is the strength of their faith that keeps a Sikh calm and composed in any time of crisis. It is why they make such effective soldiers. It is why it makes them such effective charitable organisations, because they're not afraid of getting in there, getting their hands dirty, getting on that front line, and they remain calm, composed and effective. So absolutely human. I couldn't agree with that sentiment anymore. SSI Singh, awesome show. Keep it up. Great, many thanks. Well, I will try and keep it up, but I can only keep it up if you guys continue to comment, to keep watching, to spread the word that we are here. We need more people to watch the shows. But as I say, thank you for your comment, and I will do my very best to keep going for as long as God will allow us to continue broadcasting perspectives. San Sandhu, Khalistan Zindabad, Icon Car, our regulars, Khalistan Zindabad and Gurpreet, save Punjab and the Punjab people. The only way is Khalistan. It is indeed the only answer to all these problems, as we often say and we say on a regular basis, is Khalistan, the establishment of the Sikh sovereign nation. That is what we keep fighting for. That is what we believe in. And that is what we know is coming. It is coming. You can't beat the truth. The truth will prevail. Khalistan will prevail. We look forward very much to that day, the foundational day of the independent Sikh nation of Khalistan. And on that wonderfully strong note, we will bring the show to a close. We will have a special show tomorrow, if you're particularly in the UK, but if you're outside the UK, if you want to know a horrendous scandal that the Sikh community here in the UK have been at the absolute forefront fighting a failure of the British government. Yes, a familiar story, but it's the Sikh people who've been fighting an incredible war, incredible battle here in the UK against a certain section of our society who've been targeting young girls. And it's a pretty heroic story, I have to say. It is a classic tale of grassroots activity, operations to protect people. And again, it follows every element of the Sikh faith. It is protecting the vulnerable. It is standing up for the vulnerable. It is attacking those who attack the vulnerable. Anyway, that will come out all being well tomorrow, so do stay tuned for that. It has been very much across social media this week, and I've been dying to cover the story because it's a very big story, so do keep an eye out for that. But anyway, that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching Perspectives. Do keep your comments coming in. Don't forget, you can, of course, message me specifically directly. I do read every email that comes in. Thank you for your emails. Do let me know anything you'd like me to cover. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching Perspectives. I will see you next time.